All right, so get this. For today's deep dive, we are ditching the usual research journals and stuff, and we are diving headfirst into something completely different.
Hmm.
We've got our hands on a potential unpublished manuscript,
Really?
and let me tell you, this thing is wild.
Okay.
It's got mystery, intrigue, glowing water.
What?
Yeah, you heard that right.
Glowing water?
Glowing water. We'll get there.
Okay, all right.
But so it's less of a finished story and more like what we have here is a collection of excerpts, all centered around this woman, Christina Vanderberg.
Christina Vanderbeek. Okay.
Yeah, and the excerpts are written as letters
Interesting.
to someone named Maurice.
Maurice, okay.
So we're not even sure who this is meant for, which just adds to the whole mysterious vibe of it.
Right, right.
But from what we can piece together, this Christina, she lived a fascinating life.
Okay.
Especially after she moved to Ibiza?
Ibiza.
Ibiza. Yeah, I don't know about you, but when I hear Ibiza, I think beaches, parties,
Yeah.
maybe a little mysticism thrown in there.
For sure. Ibiza has this reputation, you know?
Yeah.
It's a place that seems to attract people seeking something more.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. And the manuscript, it hints at this too. Like
Okay.
our narrator, Grace, she inherits a house in Ibiza
Okay.
from this Christina, a friend she hasn't seen in decades.
Right.
So why Ibiza?
Yeah.
Why Grace? And what happened to Christina?
Lots of questions.
There's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah.
What do we make of this Christina character so far?
Well, it seems like Christina moved to Ibiza for a fresh start, hoping to make it as a singer. But the manuscript also mentions her being drawn to the island's mystical side.
The mystical side, okay.
Yeah, like there are all these mentions of her owning books on psychic powers.
No way!
Yeah, and even one by this, shall we say, unique marine biologist. What was his name? Alberto Ribas, I think.
Berto Reba. Okay, hold on, we have to come back to him. He sounds like a character and a half.
He does, he does.
But first, let's talk about this whole Christina's death thing. It's revealed in this really subtle way through a conversation that Grace has with this local shopkeeper,
Okay.
Rosella.
Rosella.
And the way Rosella describes it, it's like Christina's connection to the ocean.
Yeah.
It ran deep, deeper than anyone realized.
Interesting. So it's almost as if the manuscript is suggesting that the sea, that it might hold the answers to the mysteries surrounding Christina's life and death.
Okay, so we've got this mysterious woman, a cryptic death, and now enter the glowing olive jar.
A glowing olive jar.
You with me?
Keep going, keep going.
Because in one excerpt, Grace finds this jar in the house that Christina left her.
Mm-hmm.
It's filled with seawater, and get this, it emits this faint glow.
Okay.
It's clearly important to the story.
Right.
But the manuscript, it leaves us hanging. It doesn't really explain it.
It doesn't explain it.
No, it doesn't. Any theories?
Well, knowing what we know about Ibiza's mystical reputation,
Right.
and this possibility that Christina was drawn to the unexplained, this olive jar could be symbolic.
Okay.
It could represent her connection to the island's hidden energies, or perhaps even something more.
Something more, okay. And it's not just the olive jar, right? Later on, Grace is out on the water at night, and she sees this glowing light out in the ocean. It's like the manuscript is dropping these visual clues, you know, but it's not giving us the full picture.
Yeah.
What do you make of that connection?
Well, the manuscript does mention bioluminescence,
Right.
which, for listeners who might not know, it's this natural phenomenon
Right.
where organisms in the water, they emit light.
Okay.
And it's pretty incredible when you think about it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not a stretch to imagine that Christina might have been captivated by that, something like that.
Right. Like imagine being drawn to this almost magical glow in the water.
Exactly. Exactly.
It definitely adds another layer to Christina's fascination with the sea, right?
Sure, for sure.
But, okay, let's talk about this Alberto Ribas, this marine biologist. He's got this whole theory about an extraterrestrial presence
Okay.
in the waters around Ibiza.
Right, right.
And he calls it La Presencia.
La presencia.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but that's giving me some serious X-Files vibe.
A little bit, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and the manuscript, it kind of plays with that line
Okay.
between science and the supernatural really well.
Yeah,
You've got Ribas, who's a scientist,
right.
but his beliefs, they venture into this territory that most would consider, far-fetched.
Right.
It makes you wonder, is he onto something groundbreaking?
Yeah,
Or is he, as you said, a character and a half?
totally, totally. And Grace is, understandably skeptical when she first meets him,
Sure, sure.
but she agrees to go on this midnight dive with him. Which, let's be real, that takes some serious guts. I don't know if I would do that.
No, I don't know if I would either, to be honest.
Would you go diving in the middle of the night with a guy who claims aliens are real?
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I don't know about that.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
But it's a classic setup, though, right?
Yes.
You have the skeptic, and they're thrown into this situation that just completely challenges everything they thought they knew.
Exactly.
And that's what happens to Grace on this dive.
Okay.
She sees something, this luminous underwater sphere.
What?
Mm-hmm. And it's described in such a way that you can tell, like, it's clear that this experience just totally shakes her to her core.
It's like she gets a glimpse behind the curtain, a peek into a reality she never even considered before.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right. And the thing is, the manuscript connects this experience to historical accounts of similar phenomena
Interesting.
near this rock formation called Esvedra.
Esvedra.
Yeah, and this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Because Esvedra, even for people who aren't, diving with eccentric marine biologists in the dead of night,
Right.
it's considered this almost mythical place.
Really?
It's been called a magnetic island, a place of power.
Wow.
Some even say that it's the tip of Atlantis.
Come on, that's wild.
Right. So crazy. Okay, so we have to talk about Grace's abilities now.
Okay.
Because after this dive, things get weird. She starts being able to read minds, influence events,
No way.
even sense people's emotions. It's like this whole other side of her just wakes up.
It's almost as if the encounter with that underwater sphere
Right.
combined with like all the energy of Esvedra, that it unlocked something within her.
Right.
And the manuscript, it even throws in some scientific jargon, to kind of ground these abilities in something real.
Yeah.
Even if it seems impossible.
Yeah.
Like they mentioned biophotons at one point, which are
Right.
these tiny, tiny particles of light that all living things supposedly emit.
Okay.
And then there's this whole thing about quantum entanglement,
Right.
which
What's
is basically the idea that particles can be linked across vast distances.
Yeah, it's almost as if the manuscript is saying, look, we know this sounds crazy, but maybe, just maybe, there's more to science than we currently understand.
Right, right.
It's pretty thought-provoking.
It is. It is. It makes you think.
It's like she's gone from 0 to 60, living in this world where science fiction is real.
Right.
But she's terrified, and understandably so,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then you've got Alberto, who's convinced that Grace was, chosen
Chosen.
by La Presencia.
Okay, so he sees her as what? Like some kind of...
Yeah, like she's
Some kind of cosmic superhero?
in training.
Right. Right. It's interesting, this idea of being chosen. It's a pretty common theme in these kind of stories, right?
It is.
But it makes you think, what if we suddenly discovered these extraordinary abilities within ourselves?
Right.
How would we handle it?
Oh, for sure.
Would we embrace it? Would it just be
Yeah.
too much to handle?
It'd be a lot, and it seems like it's a lot for Grace.
Yeah.
And then, just when she's trying to wrap her head around all of it, bam, Christina's video message. She left it for Grace in the house, and it changes everything.
What happens in the message?
Well, Christina reveals that someone is trying to kill her,
Wow.
and she begs Grace to protect Esvedra.
To protect Esvedra.
Yeah, and it's like, now it's clear that Christina wasn't just gifting Grace this house.
Right.
She was entrusting her with this mission,
Yeah, so the manuscript is really shifting gears here.
Yeah.
It's going from this, personal journey of self-discovery
Epic.
to something with much, much higher stakes.
Oh, totally. And talk about a mission impossible.
What do you mean?
Because it turns out that Esvedra,
Yeah.
it's in danger from this kind of ruthless developer, Art Butler.
Art Butler?
Yeah, and get this, he wants to build a luxury resort right on top of this supposedly mystical island.
It's like that classic conflict.
It is.
The desire to exploit nature all for profit.
Right.
Versus, the responsibility that we have to protect something that's precious.
Totally. But in this case, it feels like those stakes are even higher.
Right, because of all this mystery surrounding Esvedra.
Exactly. So now Grace is caught in the middle of all this. She's trying to go back to her normal life.
Yeah.
But she can't ignore Christina's plea, and she can't ignore this threat to Esvedra.
Hey.
And then to top it all off,
Yeah.
she almost runs over a horse and rider while she's driving, and she's convinced that her powers are to blame.
Oh, wow.
These abilities, they're more of a curse than a gift at this point.
It's interesting, right? Because I feel like we often romanticize this idea of having superpowers.
We do.
But the reality is, if we actually had them, they'd probably be incredibly difficult to control.
Totally.
And the manuscript doesn't shy away from that.
Not at all. And the tension just keeps building because later on, Grace has this confrontation with Art Butler at a casino.
At a casino.
At a casino, yeah. And guess what?
Okay.
He knows about her abilities.
Oh.
It's not totally clear. It's like he can maybe sense them or someone told him. But anyway, he uses this knowledge to manipulate her.
Wow.
Even going as far as to threaten his assistant just to get what he wants.
That's intense.
It's intense, right. And I think that scene at the casino is so pivotal because
what do you make of it?
it forces Grace to confront the ethical implications of her powers.
Right.
Like, if she can influence people's actions, should she...
That's quote.
Where do you draw the line, between using these abilities for good and crossing over into something morally ambiguous?
For sure, it's a question I think we all might grapple with if we were in her shoes.
Totally. And this is where things go from 0 to 60.
Okay.
Art Butler, he's literally choking out his assistant, Marta.
Oh, no.
And Grace, she just snaps and she lets out this wave of energy.
Okay.
The manuscript calls it the signal.
The signal.
And it's like this psychic shockwave
Wow.
that hits every living thing on Ibiza.
Everything.
Birds, animals, insects, they all feel it.
Wow, that's incredible.
But it's like the island itself is
Yeah.
rising up to defend itself.
So what happens?
Well, the manuscript describes this just incredible scene.
Okay.
Animals from all over Ibiza, they converge on the beach where Art Butler is, and they're driving him away in terror.
Wow, so it's like something out of a nature documentary?
Totally, but
Yeah.
with that supernatural twist, and in that moment, it feels like Esvedra is safe.
Right.
But the manuscript, it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah, we don't know for sure what happened to Christina
Okay.
or what Grace's future holds.
So we're left with more questions than answers.
It seems like it, which maybe that's the point of this whole thing. Maybe the real journey isn't about finding all the answers.
Right.
But it's about opening ourselves up to the possibility that there's more to this world than we realize.
And we realize, yeah, I like that.
Right. So what do you think, listeners? Are we ready to embrace the unknown, even if it challenges everything we thought we knew? This deep dive into Christina Vanderberg's impossible life, it's definitely given us a lot to think about.
It has. It's a good reminder, I think, that reality, it can be stranger than fiction.
It can.
And sometimes those most incredible journeys
Yeah.
are the ones that we least expect.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with a final thought from the one and only Alberto Ribas.
Oh, what?
He said, "What if the impossible is just another word for the truth that we haven't discovered yet? Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep an open mind."